Okay, so it seems like recently there's been a little bit of a conversation going on in the Neurosama community surrounding just Neurosama in general, especially after a lot of the stuff that's gone on with the very, very successful subathon, which we've been covering, over the past couple of weeks or so. And I do think it is an interesting conversation, and it has got very, very popular within the subreddit for r/Neurosama, and the title goes, "Hi, I'm kind of new and I'm having a bit of a moral conundrum." Now, I think it is an interesting conversation that has been talked about here. It's got 3.2 thousand upvotes, by the way, which is absolutely insane. And obviously, yeah, they go on to talk about this. They say, "So I've known about Neuro for about a year now, but recently I started watching the subathon clips." So new watcher, and they're saying, "And after watching Death, Love and Robot video on the official channel, I'm now very conflicted as I feel about her the same I feel about a cute little child." They say, "Which I think is by design, but she is not real. The Neuro I know is just the figment of my imagination, and intelligent the being called Neuro doesn't exist." They say, "I get over this by saying to myself that she's like a character from a book or a TV show, and it's alright to feel that way. But what about Vedal and Neuro's friends? If they especially Vedal feel real and genuine affection towards her, then isn't that a little concerning? Isn't this parasocial kind of loving something like a child or a friend that doesn't exist? It will always ever be a one-way relationship. Is it truly okay to love something that has at best just the imitation of a heart? And if they don't, then isn't this kind of like a family dynamic that is created by Vedal fake? The Neuro team is purposely enforcing this idea. Doesn't it feel like kind of a scam, or is it just a play performed just to entertain? I cannot decide what to feel, but mostly I still enjoy watching her no matter what." Lastly, I'd like to say this post was not made with ill intent, and would love if at least a few of you could tell your opinions on this. And obviously, yeah, they say, "Edit, God, I've never had this much attention. I'm really tired, and I can't write fast enough to save my life. I already wish to have a conversation with everyone, but this is getting out of hand. Good night." So, of course, it seems like a lot of people weren't so happy with it, but it seems like, partially some people were also not too, mad at it either, as they're having a proper conversation. Now, I do think it is a very interesting topic, right? Because obviously they're saying, they've got a whole family dynamic going on, especially with Vedal, right? And they're saying, "I feel a certain way about her, but how does like Vedal and a lot of the friends that have been interacting her feel like it?" And I think it's one of these kind of things, at least in my head, which you can kind of, I guess, relate to a project, right? There's a lot of people who work on, big projects, whether it's a coding project, an art project, a company, a business, something like just anything that they work on, right? And they end up like loving that kind of project in a different way, right? They end up like kind of getting attached to it and, yeah, loving it. Almost similarly, I think, to what Neuro and Vedal are like. Now, obviously, I'm not really gonna, speculate on how, Vedal feels about Neurosama and whatever. Of course, I think it is just one of these things where it is just a project of his, which he's obviously invested a lot of time into. So, of course, he's going to love everything about Neurosama and the project that he's working on, right? I don't think it is necessarily one of these, like, weird, he thinks Neurosama is real type thing. I don't think Vedal is like that, right? Of course, he literally created her. So, again, I think it is one of those things where you kind of like love a project rather than like kind of love Neurosama, I guess, if you get what I mean. But obviously, people have been talking about it, saying, I think it's the important part is that there is no point is Neurosama ever advertised as real. The roleplay is just that, and everyone can understand that it's for the bit. Vedal isn't actually a turtle either, so why doesn't he spark the same moral questions? I think it's a similar logic, which people are like, "Wait, what? Vedal isn't actually a turtle? Oh my god, I can't believe it." They says, "Shit's okay. Just wait for the Easter Bunny to come by with some chocolate eggs," which obviously I think is quite funny. And they said, "No, the turtle is actually a man. No way." It said, "She's not advertised to be real, but most clips I see of her either being funny or surprisingly human. Even the latest official video showing her growth focuses on her looking for love, and everyone, including me, instantly melts. I'm not very good with words, so I might not be able to explain this, sorry." And they said, "I think I understand enough, and you're totally valid for thinking this way. We all experience stories differently and relate to them differently. We can never truly understand each other, which is why enjoying stories is always a special and personal experience to all of us. My advice is that it's not worth being concerned of the others, because you only know them from the content that they put out online." And of course, that is 100% true, right? It does get to the point where some people get too parasocial about people like Vedal, and, a lot of the friends that interact with Neurosama, because of course they all feel their own way about Neurosama and, how this has come about and everything like that. And, that's for them to really share. I don't think anybody can really speculate on how they feel about it. But, I think it's very obvious that they are doing a lot of it for the stream. They are like obviously, doing a little bit of like role play or whatever, if that's what you want to call it, for the stream, which I think is understandable, right? People saying Neuro is indeed an intelligent LLM, likely not possessing any emotions, at least anything we could classify as such. Honestly, Vedal doesn't really enforce the parent and child relationship much at all. It's the fans that do it. Vedal knows that she is an LLM, that's why he doesn't say it back. If he did, he'd potentially go into the delusional territory. It's not bad to admit that Neuro doesn't feel, at least in the way that we do. LLMs are still complex and crazy intelligent for being bound to language, and so long as she is entertaining and makes people happy, she's doing good. Maybe there's something beautiful to be said about a machine that can't feel emotions, striving to improve and make people happy. Even if she can't feel, she knows we can. Maybe that's enough. They said exactly. But Neuro's friends have on multiple occasions said they love seeing her as a friend. Is that still delusional, or is there a degree of separation? I think there is a degree of separation there. They say they are VTubers, which implies that they're delusional. JK. So I don't think that would be harmful if they were, because at the end of the day, they aren't the ones developing and controlling Neuro, and they have real friends besides the twins, right? And I think that's 100% true. These people aren't just locked into a friendship with Neurosama, where they're just like saying like, oh my god, Neurosama's my only friend and whatever. No, of course, they interact with a lot of other VTubers and a lot of other people, that are real life people that are friends, right? And of course, they talk about Neurosama as like an actual person sense, because I think that's just how people do it, right? I think, of course, they're not real. Everybody knows they're not real. But, it's still a kind of, I guess, it's a virtual creator at the end of the day. So that's how they refer to them. I think it's easier to refer to them as that than trying to explain it every single time you talk about Neuro. They say Neuro exists in the sense that she's like a fictional character on the internet, just like an anime character isn't a real person with real feelings. That doesn't mean you can't like the character or what they represent, as long as you're aware that, she's not a real conscious being. You shouldn't feel bad for liking Neuro. And they said, yes, I know that. I even wrote that in the post. I'm asking about Neuro and her friend. If a person could interact with the anime character, calling them their friend, even though they remain fictional, is a moral gray zone I want to explore. And obviously, yeah, they tried to go into the fact of like the friends and the people that interact with Neurosama actually like as a person, not so much the fans and how they interact with it, which I do think is pretty interesting. But as I said, I think it is just more so them putting on a kind of a little bit of a performance, right, in terms of almost pretending that Neurosama is real, which of course I don't think there's a problem with that. I think it's fine, and as I said, it kind of saves a lot of explaining for some people if you just kind of say stuff like that, because obviously we all know that they're not delusional, right? We all know the people that interact with Neurosama on stream aren't these like delusional people that think she's real, right? Like it's clearly like a piece of code which obviously Vedal has worked on very, very hard, and has gotten to the point where, it does feel a little bit more human than it used to, at least. But I think it's more so the fans that I guess can't really differentiate it sometimes. I guess, like, I'm not saying like all the fans, by the way. I'm saying like, a small percentage that get like probably attached to it. But I think in terms of like the friends and things, I think they can very clearly tell the difference, because of course it's not like she's there constantly as like a normal friend would, right? A normal friend, you'd be able to DM them at any time privately and whatever. Neurosama, I don't think is really like that. I know she's got like some capabilities and things of joining voice chats and whatever, but let's be real, I think once Vedal turns off the computer and stuff, I think it's all kind of over, and they're not able to contact her. So it's not like they are friends behind the scenes or whatever and are constantly talking with Neuro. I think they're friends with Vedal, and of course Neuro is an extension of Vedal, and the project is an extension of Vedal, right? So of course I think they're more friends with Vedal than they are with Neuro, but obviously Neuro interacts with them, and it makes for good content and whatever that they end up doing. So of course, I think it does work a little bit differently to the fact of like a normal friend would, because of course, as I said, you can message a friend at any time, you can hang out with them or do whatever. They're very autonomous. Whereas Neurosama, I feel like that she's kind of placed into these situations, into like a stream, right, where she's in a voice call or in the VR chat world or whatever, and they are kind of placed there, right? They don't just go and go, oh hey, I'm going to join the VR chat world now. Obviously Vedal sorts that out himself and puts her in there. So I think there is that kind of disconnect, right? It's not like she's just like this being that exists and just shows up for stream because she wants to. No, obviously that is not the case, and I don't think any of the friends think that is the case, right? It is obvious that Vedal has set it up. Vedal has kind of, you know, worked on things behind the scenes to get it into the position that she's at, either, you know, streaming or, yeah, going in VR chat, doing whatever, and it's not able to be controlled by anybody else, really. So I think that is something that, you know, it's the separation that everybody knows, and I think that's why, you know, in terms of like the friends of Neuro Sama, like the people that are close, I say close, like, you know, like they're talking a lot, the people that obviously interact on stream a lot with her, I think they do have that degree of separation because, you know, a lot of it is on stream, right? I'm pretty sure I would say about 95% of the Neuro Sama interactions are on stream, you know, and I think anything off stream would be mainly with Vedal rather than Neuro, the actual AI model or whatever you want to call it, right? So again, I do think there is that disconnect, and I don't think it is as parasocial or whatever, or as kind of distorted as some people might think it might be, but I do think it was a very interesting conversation to bring up. Obviously a lot of people brought up their own kind of thoughts and things, and talking about the fact that, you know, she's almost like an anime character, right, that you kind of root for, and you can still, you know, think about them or whatever, because of course it is like a character of a show. But yeah, I mean, it was a pretty interesting conversation, and of course it seems like there's a lot of different people bringing in their own thoughts. But yeah, I mean, that is essentially all there is for this video. If you guys did enjoy it, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Also, go to GameSubs, use my code Kazza, get 10% off. Again, they got a ton of really cool stuff over there. Definitely recommend checking it out. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. That's all.